Hello and welcome to another edition of Foreign Dispatches, the program that takes you around the world in 25 minutes. I'm Layo Olarinde. On the program this week, Ukraine accepts a revised U.S. proposal aimed at ending the war with Russia. Plus, in Gaza, progress on the ceasefire remains slow as Israeli and Hamas violence continues. Ukraine says it has reached a basic understanding with the United States on a new peace plan to end the war with Russia. Although major obstacles remain, the most difficult question is whether Kyiv will cede its territories to Moscow. The announcement came as fresh strikes hit Ukrainian cities.
Russian missiles and drones are still hitting Ukrainian cities. Overnight on Tuesday, more than 20 missiles and hundreds of drones struck Kyiv and nearby regions. Several apartment blocks caught fire. At least 7 people were killed and more than 20 injured.
Turning to Ukraine, our humanitarian colleagues tell us that hostilities continue to devastate frontline communities, harm civilians in major urban centers, and inflict damage on energy infrastructure. Authorities say the cities of Kharkiv, Dnipro, Odessa, and Zaporizhzhia came under attack over the weekend and this morning, with at least 20 civilians killed and more than 100 injured, including children. Humanitarians have also been impacted. Yesterday, a drone strike damaged the premises of a humanitarian organization in the city of Koryukivka in the Chernihiv region. No one was injured. Just a few days earlier, on November 20th, in Zaporizhzhia, an aid worker from an international NGO was killed while off duty in an airstrike that claimed the lives of at least 5 civilians.
The attacks continued as Ukraine and the United States announced they have reached a common understanding on a new framework to end the war. The proposal is based on a 28-point plan the U.S. handed to Kyiv last week and refined with Ukrainian officials during weekend talks in Geneva.
Secretary Rubio, Special Envoy Witkoff, the whole team really worked through the points of that 28-point peace plan that the United States authored with input from both sides, the Russians and the Ukrainians, and ultimately the vast majority of these points have been agreed upon. The Ukrainians have worked on language with us together, and you heard that from their delegation directly yesterday. So we feel as though we're in a very good place. Of course, we have to make sure that all of these points are agreed to, and then of course we're going to have to make sure the other party in this war, the Russians, agree to them as well. But I think the president deserves a great deal of credit for the amount of energy and effort he's put into trying to bring these two sides to an end of this war. He wants to see this killing stop. As for any deadlines, he wants to see this end as soon as possible.
Reacting to the news, Russia's Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov warned that any changes to the earlier plan would fundamentally alter Moscow's position.
Too many unclear things are happening. One day Kyiv says it is ready to discuss this plan. The next day it is out of the question. We still believe a diplomatic settlement is preferable, but it must address the root causes of this conflict.
The draft plan would reportedly require Ukraine to cede some occupied territory, limit the size of its army, rule out NATO membership, and hold elections. It could also help restore Russia's relations with the West. Kyiv has not formally agreed to those points and says several issues remain sensitive. President Volodymyr Zelensky insists Ukraine must be fully involved in shaping the final terms.
Right now, when it comes to security, there is nothing to divide between us, and there are no separate issues. Everything affects all of us, and everyone needs to be fully informed. We firmly believe security decisions about Ukraine must include Ukraine. That was our position in Geneva. That framework is on the table, and we are ready to move forward together with the United States of America, with personal engagement of President Trump, and with Europe, with leaders, and with all partners who have their strengths and capacity to help. And I'm ready to meet with President Trump, and there are sensitive points to discuss.
European leaders say talks are moving in a positive direction, but are urging clarity on a proposed reassurance force for Ukraine.
Ukraine has been at the heart of many discussions over the past days. Any credible and sustainable peace plan should first and foremost stop the killing and end the war while not sowing the seeds for a future conflict. We have agreed on the main elements necessary for a just and lasting peace and Ukraine's sovereignty. And let me highlight three of them. First, borders cannot be changed by force. Second, as a sovereign nation, there cannot be limitations on Ukraine's armed forces that would leave the country vulnerable to future attack and thereby also undermining European security. Third, the centrality of the European Union in securing peace for Ukraine must be fully reflected. Ukraine must have the freedom and sovereign right to choose its own destiny. They have chosen a European destiny. It starts with the country's reconstruction, its integration into our single market and our defense industrial base, and ultimately joining our union. We will continue our work together with Ukraine, our member states, the coalition of the willing and the United States to make real progress towards peace.
Since Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine began in February 2022, tens of thousands of soldiers and thousands of civilians have been killed or injured, and millions of people have fled their homes.
In Gaza, new airstrikes have killed dozens of people, including children, as the United Nations warns that civilians are still dying every day despite the pause in hostilities. Aid agencies say winter storms, flooding and shortages are also pushing families to the brink.
More than 310 civilians have been killed since the ceasefire in Gaza took effect. Both Hamas and Israel have accused each other of violating the deal agreed over 6 weeks ago. UN agencies say airstrikes, shelling and drone fire have not stopped, and many of the victims are children.
The pattern is staggering. Since 11th of October, while the ceasefire has been in effect, at least 67 children have been killed in conflict-related incidents in the Gaza Strip.
Although there's a ceasefire, people still get killed. The Ministry of Health reported 266 Gazans killed, 634 injured, in addition to 548 bodies recovered from under the rubble since the ceasefire.
As hospitals remain overwhelmed, doctors say they cannot treat many of the children arriving with burns, shrapnel wounds, brain injuries and cancer. UNICEF estimates more than 16,000 people still need to be evacuated for life-saving care, including 4,000 children.
Gaza's doctors tell us of children they know how to save but cannot. Children with severe burns, shrapnel wounds, spinal injuries, traumatic brain injuries. Children with cancer who have lost months of treatment, premature babies who need intensive care, children who need surgeries that simply cannot be done inside Gaza today. Right now, around 4,000 children are still awaiting for urgent medical evacuations, including 2-year-old Omima, whose heart is failing because of a congenital issue doctors in Gaza cannot treat. She needs surgery urgently to save her life.
Alongside the strikes, winter rain has brought new hardship. Tents have collapsed. Sewage water has flooded camps, destroying food, supplies and bedding.
Everything is ruined. The food and the supplies. I had to throw most of it away.
The rain flooded everything, the mattresses, the blankets, even the flour. Nothing is left.
The coming winter could be devastating for families living in Gaza. Most of them are living in tents or shelters or buildings like this one. We had a first taste of winter just a week ago. The rain came down hard and people lost their food. All the food that they'd supplied, their food was spoiled, they lost their belongings.
The World Food Programme says 100 trucks a day now enter Gaza, but food still sits for long hours at crossing points and often spoils. Markets have reopened, but prices are far beyond what most families can afford.
Women showed me how water soaked through their makeshift tents, leaving their children shivering throughout the night. This is what it means to be a woman in Gaza today, to know that winter is coming and to know you cannot protect your children from it. One woman told me her home was destroyed, but every morning she returns to the rubble to gather wood, burning the doors that once sheltered her family just to make breakfast for her children. The markets that do exist with commodities are extremely expensive. As I said, food cost 4 times higher than before the war, and it's completely impossible for many of the women that I met to feed their families. As an example, an egg cost $2. No woman or girl should have to fight this hard just to survive. We need more aid to enter into Gaza systematically and safely, and we need the killings to stop.
Aid agencies want Israel to open all 5 crossings into Gaza. Only 3 are operating. They also want restrictions lifted so humanitarian groups can bring in their own supplies. At the UN Security Council, officials warn that the ceasefire remains fragile and must be upheld. They say decisions made now will determine whether the current pause leads to a political process or collapses back into war.
We invite member states ready to act through the Board of Peace to step up and pledge personnel, equipment, and funding for the ISF. Stability will require burden sharing, and your support will help make President Trump's vision for peace a reality. The ISF will help create a Gaza free of terrorist rule and safe for aid and investment by protecting civilians. This includes humanitarian operations and coordination to secure humanitarian corridors. The United States remains unwavering in its commitment to Israel's security and the demilitarization of Gaza. The recent strikes by the IDF on Hamas targets were in response to Hamas operatives violating the ceasefire. The United States recognizes Israel's legitimate security concerns.
The ceasefire must be upheld and respected in full. Nothing can justify that 1,000 Palestinians have been killed or injured since the onset of the ceasefire. Nothing can justify that since the start of the ceasefire, every single day, 2 Palestinian children are killed by Israel. Israel seeks the collapse of the ceasefire as it continues to pursue the 3 things that President Trump's plan denied it: forced displacement, occupation, annexation. It is trying to achieve this aim by stalling the entry of humanitarian aid, by resuming its attacks, and most importantly, by trying to entrench the yellow line or even to advance beyond it.
Israel will continue to honor its commitments under the plan, but we will not hesitate to neutralize the immediate threats to our citizens and our soldiers. We remain focused on achieving our goals, bringing our fallen hostages home, and ensuring that Hamas is disarmed.
The ceasefire, which took effect on Friday, October 10th, is part of a broader 20-point Trump plan between Hamas and Israel. It calls for an immediate halt to fighting, the release of all hostages, and increased humanitarian aid. Israel accuses Hamas of stalling the recovery of bodies, while Hamas says it cannot locate them under the rubble. The delays have held up the second phase of the plan, which includes plans for the governance of Gaza, Israeli troop withdrawal, Hamas disarmament, and reconstruction of the Strip.
When Foreign Dispatches returns in just a moment, South Sudanese students use the airwaves to call for peace and education in their country. Please join us again. Welcome back to the program. To Syria now, where families returning to the devastated town of Latamne are moving into caves after nearly a decade in displacement camps. With no homes left standing and no reconstruction in sight, the caves have become their only shelter.
In northern Hama, the town of Latamne is slowly coming back to life, but the destruction left by more than a decade of war is everywhere. With homes flattened and no rebuilding in sight, returning families are turning to the only shelter available, caves.
رجعنا من المخيمات لهوني بيوتنا كلها على الأرض، ليك ما عندي ولا بيت واقف.
We returned from the camps, and all our homes were destroyed. I have no standing house. We don't have the means to rebuild. I'd rather stay here, in this weather and under the rain, than return to the camp, because this is my birthplace, my country.
وبنطلب من أهل الخير يعني المنظمات هالشيء يعني يطلعوا على وضعنا.
Latamna has used caves as shelters since the early years of the war, when residents dug into hillsides to escape airstrikes. Today, those same caves serve as homes as thousands of families return to the wider northern Hama region despite the ruins. No major reconstruction projects have begun, and the transitional government in Damascus, formed in late 2024 under Ahmad al-Sharaa, has yet to announce plans for rebuilding towns like Latamne. 200 kilometers south, frustration is growing in the capital. In Damascus, residents say a new electricity price hike is pushing them beyond breaking point. Markets are busy, but beneath the bustle is anger and fear about rising costs.
We are shocked by the increase in electricity fees because our income doesn't allow for such an increase. We hope that things will improve soon and that people will be able to cope with the new situation.
I have lived here for 60 years and experienced all kinds of crises. We have endured tough times in the hope of a better future. But now, people are being burdened beyond their capacity. I refuse to pay the electricity bill.
According to the electricity establishment, subsidies are not gone. Officials say the increase is aimed at restoring financial balance and keeping services running. But Syria currently produces only a fraction of the power it needs, leaving millions with long daily outages. The tariff decision has triggered protests across several regions, with calls for prices to be brought in line with income levels. The transitional government took power last year promising reform, but with widespread destruction, soaring costs and limited resources, many Syrians say daily life is becoming harder, not easier.
Here in Africa, South Sudanese school children have taken over a United Nations radio station to deliver a powerful message. On World Children's Day, they appealed directly to their leaders for peace and education and protection, demanding a better future for the country's youngest citizens.
At Radio Miraya in Juba, the students from City View Academy arrived smartly dressed and ready for their moment.
And of course our discussions will
They stepped into the studio, took the microphones and spoke with confidence about the struggles facing children in conflict-hit South Sudan.
And with us here in the studio we have Alex.
Once they were live on air, their message was clear.
We Africans, we are having a strong leader. We are having leaders that are strong in creating war, but very weak in bringing peace. The leaders create war and they don't know who to fight. The leaders create war and they don't know who to suffer. The youth are the one to fight each other, which they don't know. The children are the one to suffer. And the man in the black coat is hiding the secret. The leaders create war and they don't know who are the leaders of tomorrow.
Their broadcast went out to hundreds of thousands of listeners across a country still battling political deadlock, insecurity, and clashes between rival parties. Many children remain out of school as families cannot afford fees.
The situation is too hard. There are children that their parents do not afford school fees. So we need to let the government also create free schools, free government schools, so that these children or these poor orphans who can't even afford education, so that they will be learning there, because these orphans are the future leaders of South Sudan.
Their teachers stand firmly behind them. Many have worked for months without pay, but they remain committed to giving their students the confidence to speak up and the chance to dream of something better.
You know, it is very important to allow children to interact and also for elders to hear their voices. As they go on here, the rest will be hearing their voices, and this is the time now to give our children their rights. When they say it, and they have to know that they have the right, for example, the rights of education that all the South Sudanese are offering today, and other rights that we are having. So this is the time to empower children. This is the time to give South Sudan a bright future through developing children.
Despite its status as the world's youngest nation, South Sudan has faced significant challenges since independence, including civil conflict that erupted in 2013 and continued through 2016, resulting in widespread displacement and loss of life. The country remains in a serious humanitarian crisis due to ongoing conflict, food insecurity, and a high cost of living.
And finally, on the program, in Belarus, an artist is turning shattered glass into striking portraits. His unusual technique is reshaping the idea of what a modern masterpiece can be. Take a look.
In his workshop in Baranovichi, Belarusian artist Roman Bondar is making art the hard way, literally. Using nothing but glass, a hammer, and a chisel, he carves delicate portraits into shattered panes, transforming broken glass into striking black and white artworks. Bondar says no one taught him this unique technique. He invented it.
It turned out to be a rare art form with no courses teaching it anywhere in the world. I became so interested in it that I decided to learn it myself. Through trial and error, it took me about 2 years to master it.
A trained musician, Bondar's journey into visual art began after a car accident, when he noticed a beautiful silhouette in a cracked windshield. That moment sparked years of experimentation. Each portrait, he says, requires intense precision and patience.
Everyone asks about the type of hammer or glass I use, but the real challenge is working with the face, understanding its charisma, expression, and shadows.
Creating one portrait can take anywhere from a single day to a full month, and one wrong strike can shatter weeks of work.
Sometimes I finish a painting and go to add the final touch. Then a web of cracks appears. I have to start all over.
Now Bondar is collaborating with Moscow-based Art Epicenter to bring his work into urban architecture, integrating his glass portraits into shop windows, doors, and staircases. He's also developing a new project, Psychological Portraits of the Future, aimed at exploring the emotions and challenges of modern society, one shard of glass at a time.
That's the program today. Remember, you can catch all our top stories and more on channelstv.com. Thank you for watching. I'm Layo Olarinde.